Hello, please welcome Maya Satya Reddy to QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2021. Maya is a former professional golfer and LGBTQ plus athlete activist. She is also an athlete ally ambassador and the founder of the Queer Asian Social Club. Thank you so much, Maya, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's also really lovely getting to talk with other Indian folks who know how to pronounce my name. It's always a joy.
Absolutely a pleasure, Maya. So, Maya, I would actually like to start with how difficult was it for you to come out considering you were, in competitive sports, and what was your support system like that at that time?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with coming out to myself. It took a while. Like I think for a really long time I knew that I was a bit queer. And definitely looking back on it, it's not just a bit, it's very, very queer. But it was only when I got to undergrad, when I was kind of on my own, and experiencing life outside of, my parents, and surrounded by such incredible people, that I was like able to really explore my sexuality and be like, no, this is who I am. I am queer, and this is what queer means to me. And so when it comes to sports, it was really kind of a shield, for me to explore my identity and also feel like I'm not being singled out by non-South Asian, not basically white folks, and straight folks as, kind of being looked at as the queer brown girl who's in this sport that is traditionally really white. So yeah, coming out was, I don't know, I really credit sports for giving me the space to, and golf in particular, for giving me the space to take my time to explore my identity. And in terms of coming out, like I said, it did take some time, but golf, even though it is a very white and straight sport, really kind of was the shield for me where I could be seen as this really good golfer and have the space to be like, okay, who am I? What does it mean to be an Indian woman? What does it mean to be a Desi kid in the United States? What does it mean to be queer? Because I wasn't feeling like I was being looked at as all of those things. I was just being looked at as this golfer. And so I'm really grateful for that space. I'm also incredibly grateful for my parents being super, super supportive. I was always very scared about coming out to them, but, I'd always been a really vocal advocate for LGBTQ rights. I grew up in California, and we had something back in 2008, I believe it was, called Proposition 8, which was to I think it was to make gay marriage illegal. I'm fully forgetting the specifics of it, but it was bad for gay people. And I remember being really, really vocal about that. And so when I eventually came out, and I was 23 when I came out to my parents, my mom's reaction was, I hate that you felt like you have to be okay with everybody else and not with yourself. She was like, I just want you to be, as much of a champion for yourself as you have been for all of these other people. And that was like really, really amazing. Having the support of my parents who fully saw me, and it's still kind of a work in progress where they're understanding the queer community and understanding the work that I do in it, but they've been nothing but supportive. And my teammates throughout my golf career have been incredibly supportive. Finding spaces like Athlete Ally and communities like Athlete Ally have been nothing short but incredible, and really empowering. And, the hard bit was playing professionally. It's like outside of these people who knew me, and when you're starting to play this sport as your career, any sport as a career, there's so many different pressures that come into that about keeping up appearances and being acceptable or alluring to sponsors. And like I said, because golf is a very straight white sport, there isn't a lot of space for women, women of color, or queer folks. It's only been recently that there have been more visible queer golfers. Tad Fujikawa is the first male golfer to come out as gay. We have Mel Reid on the LPGA Tour, who is also a fellow Athlete Ally Ambassador. A friend of mine, Haley Davidson, is the first trans woman to win a professional golf tournament. And so there's more, but I'm only naming kind of less than 5 folks who are visible and speaking out and kind of fostering that community within the golf world. So, and that was only recently. This has only been like in the past 2 years, and I wasn't playing golf, or I haven't been playing professionally the past 2 years, but I was back in 2015, and there wasn't that much visibility, and so it was really hard. And also, I was playing during the lead up to the 2016 election, so a lot of people in the United States were becoming more vocal about their discrimination because of then candidate Donald Trump being not great, very discriminatory. And so when I went to the golf course, it was facing a lot of homophobia and xenophobia and racism that took the form of like blatant statements to microaggressions. And I remember very distinctly a lot of anti-immigrant and Islamophobic sentiment. And while my family isn't Muslim, people in the United States kind of just see all brown people as the same thing. And when that was tied into an anti-immigrant sentiment and having family and really, aunties and uncles who are Muslim, who I grew up with, it was just like, oh, so you don't want me or my family here. And that was really hard to have to navigate my understanding of what it means to be queer in the golf world, feeling like I had to hide it and kind of make myself smaller so that I wasn't, faced with further hate. And that just really kind of tanked my career, because how are you supposed to play at the highest level when you're constantly negotiating all of your identities and trying to make yourself smaller? But that was a very long answer. It's equal parts kind of great with my family and close friends, and also not so great in the professional golf world. Though I have to say that has been changing a lot.
No, actually, you did manage to answer 2-3 questions of mine at once. So
Amazing.
Definitely thank you for that. But this does bring up a lot more new questions. So for example, it is very evident that you went through harsher times because, well, the leadership which was going to be voted was very openly anti this community, and that kind of gave people this sort of permission that you can be cruel, that you can be homophobic. And I think that's just extremely unfair and extremely detrimental. And I can't imagine, as you said, that you don't not only had to fight being queer, like your identity of being queer, but also because you were South Asian, so you had these multiple identities, which were, instead of you being openly proud about them, you were forced to become smaller and smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
So now,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's like the perfect way to put it. And I mean, to a certain extent, because it's the United States, people of color, no matter what non-white ethnicity you are, there is a lot of negotiating with your identity, and because it is so visible. And the same is also true for folks of other marginalized identities that aren't tied to their race. But there is this constant pressure to minimize yourself as a self-protective thing, which, you know, so many people and so many folks are working to change, and there has been a lot of change, but that pressure is still there, and it's tough. It's tough trying to negotiate that, and it's tough, especially when you're younger, trying to figure that out while also really wanting to be authentically yourself.
Maya, if I ask you, because you keep saying that things are changing, but of course not as fast as it should be. If I ask you, for you, what do you think are the three ways in which we can have an acceleration in queer representation, especially in sports?
Yeah, no, so I think that what organizations like Athlete Ally, I'm a huge fan of them. I love the Athlete Ally folks just super dearly. But what they're doing to not only through their ambassador program create a lot of visibility for queer athletes and allies in a multitude of sports at a multitude of different levels, but also providing like educational tools. One of the really incredible things that Athlete Ally does is they, for over the more than 5 years, they've been training or providing education for the entering class of NBA players on what LGBTQ inclusion means and how to practice that, which is really amazing. Like education is, along with visibility, are two really incredible and important pieces of activism and inclusion. Over in India, right, we have Duty Chand, we have athletes all around the world who are talking about LGBTQ inclusion, and also those who are just being visibly queer and excelling at their sport and really showing that it really doesn't matter who you are, but being yourself fully only makes sport a better place and makes your game even better and makes playing the thing that you love that much more fun and fulfilling. So yeah, visibility.
I think that is very well articulated, Maya. Thank you. But Maya, I actually, this brings me to a very difficult question that I really want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up Duty Chand. You
Mm-hmm.
brought up that you brought up the current politics of USA 2021, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel that you are privileged because you are a part of the diaspora and you're a part of the queer diaspora in the global north?
Yeah. I mean, I am a cisgender woman, and even though I'm a queer woman of color, in the current state of sports, and especially in the current state of politics in the United States, I do hold a lot of privilege, not only in the fact that I am a cisgender woman, as compared to my trans siblings, but also in the fact that I have, you know, so a specific socioeconomic status. Like I have a very supportive family who has been able to put me through undergrad. I'm currently in law school at an Ivy League university. I have access to a lot of these high-level concepts about queer theory and all of these things, which a lot of people don't have. And I think for me, it's been really important, and my partner actually has been teaching me, I've been learning a lot from her on, it's really great to have all of this knowledge, but if you have all of this knowledge and you don't know how to share it with folks in a way that's really easy to understand, then what's the point? And so I think in that way, that is one way that I recognize my privilege, and I really want to make sure to use whatever I know to be like, hey, you know, it doesn't have to be this complicated. At the end of the day, it's like empathy. Like, how do we take these high-level concepts and understand the patriarchy and like all of these systems of power and abuse and put them in this form where it's like, how do we, folks who don't have this access to education or these high-level concepts, how do they understand them in a way to fight back, and not having to use like, again, these really high-level concepts. And then I also think that, speaking specifically to my privilege as a cisgender woman, right now there are increasing attacks against trans folks, and especially trans women in the United States. There have been, this past legislative session has been the worst on record. And I don't remember the exact amount of bills that were introduced, but there are 10 states that have signed into law a very explicitly anti-trans legislation. This legislation ranges from restricting access to, basically preventing trans kids from accessing medical care, as well as preventing trans kids from participating in sports. And, it's terrible. Like, as much homophobia and racism as I have faced, I was still able to, and I still am able to access sports. For trans kids and trans athletes at any level of sport right now, they are still questioned, and there are still efforts to prevent them from even accessing sports and playing the thing that they love. And, with Duti Chand, and then you also have Caster Semenya, and a lot of women, so sorry about that, my dog is running in the background. But, it's a lot of women of color who are perceived as not fitting into the gender binary and not perceived as being, quote unquote, women, or whatever overall society deems is feminine enough to be determined as a woman, which I think, pardon my language, is absolutely bullshit, because being a woman looks like so many different things, and all of the different ways that people express femininity, as well as masculinity, is all valid and beautiful, and you don't have to strictly identify as a woman to celebrate femininity or femme aspects of just who you are. And I think that's really, really beautiful. But, I had access. I guess all of this is to say is, like, I have had access and continue to have access to sport without being questioned about my ability to just be in that sport. I'm not being labeled as a threat. I am not being, like, the ways in which homophobia and racism have functioned against me have been incredibly harmful, and it's stuff that I'm still working through in therapy.
So since, Maya, you have mentioned how you were forced to leave and that you're still facing emotional repercussions, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the Queer Asian Social Club a sort of way to heal for you? Is it something that you are, okay?
Absolutely. It's Queer Asian Social Club is, even though founded in the United States, right, it's been really important to all of us to really emphasize that there are no boundaries to it. Like, the queer Asian diaspora doesn't just exist in the United States. And for me, on my own journey on, like, understanding kind of my queerness and my South Asianness, it's been really incredible getting to connect with people and organizations like yours and these initiatives back in the motherland with Gacy Zine, right? I know my family's from Hyderabad, and there's, like, a blossoming queer scene in Hyderabad right now. And that has been really, really empowering and validating in this incredible way. And that's something that we want to bring into Queer Asian Social Club, which, like, no matter what type of Asian you are, and no matter where you're looking for validation or looking for connection with your culture, that doesn't live solely in the United States. And when we're expanding that idea of the diaspora and our cultures and our histories, it's just even more empowering. But to answer your question more directly, Queer Asian Social Club was very much born out of me realizing that there's not a lot of queer Asian representation in media. In the United States, we see a lot of Asian representation, and by a lot, I just mean here and there. And we're seeing it more and more often, right? We have Shang-Chi, we have Marvel's The Eternals that's coming out next week, that has Kumail Nanjiani in it. It has Chloe Zhao is the director, Oscar-winning Chloe Zhao. and so many other Asian actors that I can't remember their names off the top of my head. Gemma Chan, one of the leads. But even then, with this kind of like new wave of Asian representation in Western movies, it's not that much when you think about it. And so I remember growing up being like, wait, I don't see myself on TV. I think the first time I really saw myself was in Bend It Like Beckham because of Jess, and then also she plays sports. And then also, like, I think that everybody can agree that was a very queer movie. But when I was trying to look for myself in film and television, I didn't really see myself. Even though there were some depictions of Asian folks in media, tended to be primarily folks of East Asian descent. And I had this whole thing growing up where I was like, okay, I'm seeing mostly East Asian folks on TV. I'm going into spaces that are called Asian, but tend to skew a little bit more towards East Asian folks. And that is by no means kind of like a dig at anything. I think that's really incredible. I also think that not having a lot of representation of the wide breadth of Asian identities and what it means to be Asian, it's pretty isolating, right? When you don't see yourself. And so, I come back to this quote all the time, which was really kind of formed the whole ethos of Queer Asian Social Club, but it's like, you can't be what you can't see. And with Queer Asian Social Club, we just want to provide a space of visibility where, all of the incredible nuances and differences and also similarities between all the entire Asian diaspora from Southwest Asia to the Pacific Islands, right? Like, feel like there's a space for us to be seen and to be known and have our stories celebrated. And in those nuances between all of our cultures and the similarities between all of our cultures, which we like to joke as we all love rice. That's a commonality between Asians. But we also want to create that space to celebrate our queer histories and our queer identities. Recently, we did this incredible collaboration with an artist named Erwin Hines and Mo Fung. And they created this piece of art called Can We Meet in Our Dreams? And it's a celebration of our ancestors and, recognizing all of the lessons and all of, the stories that course through us, that our this world that our ancestors really built and that we're continuing to build upon, and how there's so much power in that and connecting with your roots, the good parts, the bad parts, and kind of embracing that has been really, really powerful and something that's really important to Queer Asian Social Club, as well as the other most important part is just creating a space where we can be. Like, it's called a Queer Asian Social Club because there are a lot of incredible groups out there doing very important activism, and that's incredible and huge and important. And there aren't always enough spaces to just be us, to go to like a drag brunch on the weekend, to play Mario Kart, to have a music festival, and to just be ourselves and not. Yeah, exactly. And to not just, to not feel like we have to do a very specific form of activism. And actually, some of the most radical forms of activism and empowerment is just getting to be authentically joyful as our queer Asian selves. And so that's kind of a selfish thing for me. I was like, I want a space where I get to see people like myself, where I get to connect with other queer South Asians, where I get to connect with people who have such similar experiences as mine, and also different experiences, and getting to learn and connect and, see us in our diaspora in all its glory. Because I like I said, like the few folks that I saw represented, queer Asian folks that I saw represented growing up was Jess in Bend It Like Beckham, and I'm deciding that she is queer. And then Kalinda Sharma on The Good Wife, Archie Punjabi, who hilariously also was in Bend It Like Beckham as Pinky. But it's just like I can count on one hand how many times I felt represented. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited for the upcoming Miss Marvel TV show that's by an entirely South Asian creative team, and starring a character named Kamala Khan, who is a Pakistani American teenager who turns into a superhero. And like, that's really phenomenal. Like, that's so cool. We're getting an entire TV show about a South Asian kid who is a superhero. Like, I don't know if I thought that would ever happen. And so that validation is really incredible, to just see yourself, no matter what age you are.
No, and I'm really hoping that this just keeps on giving people hope, and it keeps on sparking that, you know, energy in people that yes, things are getting better. And thank you so much, Maya. It was a very, very informative and lovely chat. Thank you for being a part of QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2021.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I said it in a lot of different ways, but it really means a lot to get to connect with folks from the motherland, especially queer folks from the motherland, because it kind of helps me feel a little less alone. And just as a fun note, I don't know if you've heard of the Pixar short Sanjay's Super Team, but it was this Pixar short that came out a few years ago. Highly recommend watching it, but about this Desi kid growing up in California who, in an effort to understand his dad's Hinduism and like his practice of Hinduism, he begins to imagine the Hindu gods as a team of superheroes. And then, it's just really lovely, and this really wonderful blending of like what it means to be a third culture kid in the diaspora. And also, it's just really fun to think about the gods as superheroes, because aren't they kind of like superheroes?
No, I'm really hoping that I would definitely, if not in the main video, in our profile, I'll definitely put this recommendation down. It does sound fun. But really, thank you so much, Maya, for talking so candidly with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.